Sometimes we hear about this new phrase in real estate transactions. Oftentimes it comes up when we're in multiple offers, and the agent will say, "Do you have an appraisal gap coverage?" That sounds a little foreign to a lot of people. So today we're going to be explaining exactly what that means and how you might be able to use it for your advantage. Listen in.
Thanks for tuning in to the Realtor Moms Podcast. I'm Tasha.
And I'm Jamie. We're full-time realtors in the FM and surrounding areas, and admittedly average moms. This is how we sell homes
And try to keep our kids alive. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. So, appraisal gap coverage, appraisal gaps. There's a lot of information, and I don't want anyone to get that deer in the headlights look. Sometimes when I talk about these things and I'm trying to educate my buyers and sellers on what this is, it can happen. It can.
It does. I like to mention it during the buyer consult.
I do too.
And I always know that that's not going to be the conversation that a buyer necessarily goes back to and thinks, "Oh yeah, this was explained to me. I know exactly what this is." I like to tell them, I'm gonna bring up this thing called an appraisal gap or appraisal gap coverage, and we're gonna talk about it a little bit now, and then if it becomes something that's pertinent, I'm going to be way more greater in depth about it, if it's even something you want to consider when it becomes potentially pertinent.
So really right now the question is, what is an appraisal gap? What is it? So from there,
neither of us wants to answer this. No.
An appraisal gap happens when the appraised value of a home comes in lower than the price you've agreed to pay for it.
Exactly. So when we sell a house, right, like the buyers and the sellers have to come to an agreement on the sale price.
Correct.
And lots of other terms. But for this episode, we're just kind of talking about the sale price. And then if you're financing, your bank, if you're the buyer, or if you're the seller, then it's the buyer's bank, sends out an appraiser. And that appraiser does an evaluation of the property. They call it an inspection, but it's not an inspection looking for faults in the home. It's an inspection for the purpose of determining a value, and they call that the appraisal. And if the appraisal value doesn't come in as high as the agreed upon purchase price, then we've got kind of a problem.
Then we have a problem.
That's what we call the gap. The gap is the difference between what the appraiser said the house is worth and the purchase agreement says the house is being sold for.
Yes. So what we see with appraisal gap coverage, and I'm going to be very open about this, most of the time if you see someone willing to offer an appraisal gap coverage is because of circumstances like multiple offers.
Yeah.
That's the time we generally see it.
Right.
So what an appraisal gap coverage is when the buyer agrees to upfront the cost for that gap in a difference in cash. So, if, for example, let's say a home came in at $400,000, it was listed at for $400,000, the appraisal comes back at $380,000, there's a $20,000 appraisal gap.
Right.
And appraisal gap coverage could cover that entire $20,000 amount, and it could cover a portion of that amount, but that is what appraisal gap coverage would be, is the buyer would pay some of those costs towards that gap.
Right. And make no mistake, this is not an insurance policy. This is the buyer saying, "Yep, I've got that money in my bank account, and I am willing to take it out of that bank account and use it to buy this house," because
Correct.
The bank will only generally finance as much as is appraised. So the lender is just going to finance up to the appraisal value, not necessarily the full purchase price, if the appraiser doesn't agree that the purchase price is equal to the worth of the property. So basically, you're coming up with, "Oh shoot, we don't have enough money coming from the lender to give us to buy this house." So you as the buyer are saying, "Yes, I do have the money for the difference that the bank won't give me to close on this house or to seal the deal."
And a lot of times I tell people, depending on what that number is, even if you don't want to offer the full amount, you can always offer
and that can be kind of a gamble too.
It can be a gamble, but if you only can offer a $2,000 toward that is an option,
right?
But you
or 20 or
20,
5,
whatever it may be.
Whatever.
But this is a discussion, like I said, when we are both helping our buyers and trying to get them into a home when there's multiple offers.
Yeah. So explain to me how it might look not to put you on the spot or anything, but how it might look on a purchase agreement. Let's say we've got this house. We use this $400,000 as just kind of an idea of a listing price. And you find out, Tasha, that you're going to write an offer, and I'm the listing agent, and we already have 2 other offers. Like, what might, and you don't have to use exact words, but like if you wanted to make an offer and it was going to be $420,000, for example, because your people really want this house. And from my perspective, or from the seller's perspective, they're like, well, we listed the house at $400,000. We're really not sure
if the home is going to appraise for that.
Yeah, that it's going to appraise for $420,000. Yeah. Like, what might you do in your offer?
One thing that you can do, and this is not word for word of what I would say, or how I'd write it, but if the appraisal comes in low, the buyer is willing to pay up to, or the buyer is willing to pay $20,000 extra to cover the difference.
Sure, extra above the
appraised value. Correct.
Yeah. So, could you say, yeah, we'll offer $420,000, but we'll only offer $10,000 of appraisal gap coverage?
That certainly can be done. That's an option.
Sure.
Jamie and I have both done that
right.
many, many times, but it's all talking about what you're the buyer, as the buyer, what is that buyer comfortable with? What are you comfortable with paying above and beyond? And maybe there is a budgetary constraint to what someone can offer.
Yes, and there a lot of times is. So we're not out here trying to tell anybody that if you don't have an extra $20, $50, $75, or even $1,000 to put towards an appraisal gap that you can't make a multiple offer. That is not our position on this at all. We are just wanting to provide some additional education on
what is this,
what it means.
And if you can use it, great. And if you can't, no big deal.
Yeah. And from the seller's perspective, just to kind of reiterate, if you're selling your home and you're getting these offers and they're kind of getting crazy, right? Because sometimes we get lucky enough that we get multiples.
Yes.
And for one buyer to be beating out the other buyer, we like to see that dollar figure keep getting higher. That's wonderful. But if there's none of these buyers are able to say, yep, if it doesn't appraise for as much as I'm offering you, I'm still going to buy it for what I'm offering you. If nobody can come with that appraisal gap coverage, you got to ask yourself how worthwhile.
What will the home really appraise for?
Yeah, you got to ask yourself, like, do I take this offer that's double the asking price, or whatever? If the buyer doesn't have any money to back up their really high offer, you basically end up back at potentially the negotiating table if the appraisal comes in low and you haven't already addressed what would happen in the instance of a gap.
And that can be a little stressful because in that kind of a scenario you just mentioned, you're probably just a couple weeks out from closing.
That was going to be my next point.
Yeah, you can be very close to closing, and then people have already hired the moving trucks or the moving companies and already, put in notices to apartments. Or what if you are selling your property?
Selling your furniture.
There can be so many scenarios, and it gets harder as the process moves along.
Right.
To have these kind of scenarios pop up.
Yeah. So it does become potentially a negotiable item if the house doesn't appraise for what it's sold for, unless there's already been some sort of discussion otherwise that would say, if there's a shortage, we'll pay all of it, or we'll pay a part of it, which then if the shortage, the gap coverage that the buyer is offering doesn't cover the entire gap, the entire amount that the appraisal is different from the purchase price, then you could still potentially end up negotiating a little bit. So, there's a lot of things that move and flex in real estate.
Yes.
It's never an exact science. And there's no guarantees.
There's no guarantees.
But we do what we can.
But here's, this is our episode, and now you've learned a little bit more about what appraisal gap coverage is.
Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you hear, you can check out our library of tons more episodes on RealtorMomsPodcast.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or just about anywhere you listen to podcasts. And please never hesitate to reach out. We would love to be your realtors. This podcast is produced by Realtor Moms Podcast. Jamie R. Swenson, Park Company Realtors, 4170 41st Avenue South, Fargo, North Dakota.
And Tasha Barrett with Real, 3961 4th Street East, West Fargo, North Dakota, 58078.